Gotham Knights versus Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. What's the better game? Now, before I get started, if you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing. And like what I said, today we'll be talking about Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad and talking about, what game is better. Now, overall, before I get started, a little bit of a disclaimer. Both of these games are absolute disasters. So, try to take what I say with a grain of salt because obviously, if you guys know me, I think that one game is a lot better than the other, but I won't get into that until later on in the video. But just the fact that I'm making this video in 2025 talking about these two games and comparing them and what game is better, I think it just shows how bad we have had it in, the games division, and that WB needs to sort of step it up and give us better games. And I'll kind of stay with that. And also, too, in the comment section, guys, please be mindful. Please be respectful of each other's opinions. Both of these games are honestly disasters, but I think both of them offer some fun stuff, and they both have great things, and they both have horrible things. It's really just kind of like pick your poison. So, yeah. But let's get started. First things first, I'm going to be talking about Gotham Knights and how I feel about Gotham Knights. And then later on, we'll move on to Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and then ultimately conclude with the conclusion of what game is better, in my opinion. That's another thing that I'll have to state, in my opinion. So, let's get started. Now, like myself and others, I think a lot of us were hyped for Gotham Knights when it originally got announced, I believe back in 2020. But the funny thing I love about, Gotham Knights, and something that I've still been trying to figure out, one of the biggest mysteries, is when the gameplay trailer first got revealed for Gotham Knights, no one liked it. Everyone hated it. People said that this game was terrible and that it wasn't Arkham, even though WB Montreal made it clear as day that it wasn't trying to be Arkham, that they wanted it to be something else entirely, and it was a new take on, Batman characters and the lore. And, oddly enough for myself, that original gameplay I actually really liked. It's kind of like lost media now, but it looked really promising and it looked really good. Now, in all honesty, in my opinion, this wasn't the game that we got. In Suicide Squad's case, the gameplay mainly stayed the same, but Gotham Knights here looks completely different from what we got. And just to show you an example, I mean, obviously this is the gameplay of, what it looks like on the Bat bikes, and as you can see, the city is rapidly changing and moving in this 2020 demo. And then it's when you play the actual game, for example, or you look at the actual game here, and it just doesn't even compare to what was shown off in the demo. And the bikes, believe it or not, would drop your frame rate to 15 frames per second because the game was just poorly optimized. But anyways, here's a much funnier clip related to Gotham Knights that you guys might like.
I'd lick that camera.
Anyways, that was an old clip from the early days of, the Pineapple Sway channel. But, back to Gotham Knights, it's in all honesty, I think if they just stuck with what they showed us in the demo and didn't listen to, what people had to say about the game, complaining that, it's not Arkham, complaining that it's not this, it's not that, if they just stuck to their original vision, I think this game could have been one of the better games, for DC, if not one of the best superhero games, of all time. Because, this demo, I was absolutely in love with it. And was sold, from day one that this game was going to be incredible when it did eventually release. But then it's the second gameplay came out when it had I think it was a Red Hood and Nightwing feature, and then Nightwing had his Fortnite glider, and Red Hood had his mystical leap, and it's the game just got stupider and stupider, not, or it just got it just looked worse and worse as time went on, and it's just what happened to what they originally had planned. And it just begs the question of, why do companies, always listen to people that don't play the game? Because it's this game was fun, it had its moments, but it's just it had so many flaws. It was absolutely incredible. And something, I still don't understand to this day is they killed Batman, for example, in this game, and then they brought him back, and then they killed him again. It just doesn't make sense. Stick with what you have. Are you going to keep him dead? Are you going to keep him alive, to be a mentor? It's just, this game was just really wishy-washy and all over the place, much like another game I'll be talking about in a few minutes. And it's just a big problem, with DC. It's like none of these games seem to know exactly what they want to do. But, on paper, these are incredible ideas. People wanted a Bat Family game, and that's exactly what they gave us. It was just poorly executed. Much like Kill the Justice League, although Kill the Justice League is much more all over the place than Gotham Knights, which I give Gotham Knights credit. They at least kind of stuck with what they had, the Court of Owls and, the League of Shadows, while Suicide Squad, for example, like, here's the Justice League, here's Brainiac, the Justice League's evil, oh, Batman's alive, all of this, the Suicide Squad's here, all of these things. There was just kind of too much in one pot, in Kill the Justice League, and it just kind of, I would say, left a sour taste in people's mouths. While Gotham Knights, is, I would say, a lot better perceived than Kill the Justice League. I just don't think, Gotham Knights has a lot to offer. Unlike Kill the Justice League, which, I'll explain later. In my opinion, I just feel like Kill the Justice League had a lot more to offer and a lot more to do. And, playing Gotham Knights, the gameplay, in my opinion, was very sluggish and slow. But, it still had its great features. For example, something I really liked about Gotham Knights was its stealth mechanics. It reminded me a lot of, the Arkham series, which I love to see that sort of come back. While, Suicide Squad, to each of their own, didn't really have any stealth mechanics at all, and it didn't really have any true combat mechanics. The combat was kind of the same, I would say, while in Gotham Knights they at least tried to diversify each character and make them feel different by giving them different abilities. While, like, in Kill the Justice League, for example, you just chuck a grenade and just boom, and that's really just how you play that game. But, to Gotham Knights' defense, they tried to make them unique with the traversals, but, they just didn't really hit, I would say, much like Kill the Justice League. Something that, Kill the Justice League did tremendously was the traversals, like, without a doubt. They absolutely killed it in terms of, each squad member's traversals, and that's what really, I think, made the game a lot of fun, is going back and trying out new characters. While, in Gotham Knights, it's like once you played, the characters for a while, you kind of just stuck to one, and then that was really it. You didn't really switch to each characters. Moving on. A big problem, I had with Gotham Knights, which I know a lot of people don't really bring up, if at all, is the fact that, I can't remember correctly, but it's on one save file. It's across one save file. So you can't, restart and go back and play the game, which is kind of stupid in my opinion. Because, we all remember from Arkham Origins, and the, Arkham trilogy, we'd have 4 save files to choose from. And, in Suicide Squad's case is, you couldn't do the same thing either, but, they at least added, that quality of life improvement later on down the line with the offline mode, which you can reset at any given time, so you can start fresh if you wanted to. But Gotham Knights, for some reason, didn't have that. It's like you couldn't go back and play the game again if you wanted to start fresh as a new character. And plus 2, GK had scaled progression, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just kind of defeats the purpose of wanting to test and try a new character. And if you're like, what the heck is scaled progression? Well, you hit level 30 with one character, the other characters are level 30. It's not like Suicide Squad where, you'd hit level 30 with Harley, then your Deadshot would be level 1, your Joker would be level 1, so then you have to grind and build them up as well. It was scaled progression, which I would say, kills a lot of replayability. And I think something that Suicide Squad had that Gotham Knights didn't have none of whatsoever was replayability. You could always go back and kill the Justice League and test new builds and have fun with that. While Gotham Knights was kind of on the same scale of builds and stuff. Really, in all honesty, you just wanted to go for the mythic gear in Gotham Knights, and once you had mythic gear, you were kind of just the most overpowered thing ever. And since enemies scaled to you as well, if you didn't have mythic gear, you would get absolutely crushed, and then the game at times would just feel sort of unplayable. But, moving on to my conclusion, what are some things that Gotham Knights did better than Suicide Squad? Well, the story, for one, they kind of just stuck to what they had. I don't necessarily agree with the story, but, they at least stayed on pace, while Suicide Squad was literally all over the place. And another thing, too, what I liked about Gotham Knights was its stealth mechanics and, its ability to sort of just have characters be diversified in gameplay, something that Kill the Justice League didn't have whatsoever. And, lastly, the game wasn't live service. Gotham Knights wasn't live service. That's another big thing for someone like myself, and I know a lot of gamers out there is games being live service. Kill the Justice League had no right to be live service whatsoever, but unfortunately it was. And however, WB had to make the hard choice of choosing Gotham Knights to be live service or Suicide Squad to be live service, because Gotham Knights had live service elements. It just obviously wasn't live service. It wasn't picked by WB, while WB handpicked Suicide Squad to be live service. But that's a plus for Gotham Knights, is they didn't have those elements at all. Now, Kill the Justice League, what did this game do right? And you're probably thinking, the game did nothing right at all. Well, there's actually a few things that Suicide Squad did do right, and I think are positives, which makes it a lot better of a game than Gotham Knights, in my opinion. And starting with one is performance. Gotham Knights, for some reason, on the next-gen consoles, even on PC, just performs poorly. And I'm not really sure why it's poorly optimized, but and even graphically speaking, it feels like a downgrade. People like to make the joke that it looks like an Xbox 360 game, and although I don't necessarily agree with that, I think the game still looks good. It just doesn't really feel or look how a next-gen game should. And next thing too is, the city, the map. Metropolis is beautiful, like it or not, in Kill the Justice League, while Gotham in Gotham Knights is just kind of feels like a generic map. There's 3 islands, there's 2 or 3 long bridges that connect each island, and each island doesn't really have, a feel to them. Metropolis, every building is unique, every building stands out, while Gotham Knights, it feels like you're just kind of looking at a blank canvas. A lot of things could have been placed to make the city feel alive and well, but at the end of the day, it still feels dead. And oddly enough, in my opinion, Suicide Squad feels more of alive in the city when there's 0 civilians, while Gotham Knights, it's an active city. It's a living city. Citizens are living in it, but you just don't really notice them. It doesn't feel alive. It has no depth whatsoever, which is why I think Suicide Squad, in terms of world building, they absolutely killed it with Metropolis, whether you like it or not. And, another thing, too, with both of these games technically being looter shooters, I think Suicide Squad is by far the better looter shooter. As, like what I said, once you got mythic gear in Gotham Knights, that was really all you needed. Gear wasn't really diversified. It wasn't really, expanded upon. It was just, hey, get the mythic gear, and then your character is cracked. While Suicide Squad, you could make a ton of builds and find unique stuff, adding gameplay value, adding replay value. But like what I said, the characters, however, in Kill the Justice League were absolutely terrible. They all felt the same. They all played the same. The only thing that really made them unique, in my opinion, was their traversals. However, the traversals, like what I said, was really the best part of Suicide Squad. And I think that's what led a lot of people coming back to play, is wanting to try out the new and fun traversals. But, playing the characters just didn't really feel all that unique. But Gotham Knights had that uniqueness. They had that uniqueness with each individual character. They each had their own unique set of abilities, their unique moves, and, weapons at their disposal. While, Suicide Squad, you would have thought that, Harley would have used her iconic, bat, maybe a pistol. Boomerang would have used his iconic, boomerangs, but they didn't. They all used guns and grenades, which, from a creative standpoint, was that the best decision? Maybe. I don't necessarily know, but I think giving them, their each unique abilities and weapons, like what Gotham Knights did, would have helped Suicide Squad in the long run. And it's like what I said, Gotham Knights takes that, in terms of character, gameplay, in terms of, combat gameplay, Gotham Knights takes the cake. But in terms of traversal gameplay, Suicide Squad by a large margin, and I don't even think it's close. And, a problem that both of these games had, I would say, is really boss variety and, enemy variety. We kind of were not really used to enemy variety in the Arkhamverse, since we would kind of just fight the same enemies over and over. And, back in the day, it wasn't really a big complaint. But, when games get bigger and bigger over time, when technology gets better, you expect to see more in terms of enemies and bosses that you're facing. And, Suicide Squad and Gotham Knights didn't really have that. Suicide Squad, you would just fight, as people like to say, enemies with purple zits on them. And, it was kind of a funny joke, because in this gameplay trailer, that's kind of what we're looking at, is, you just shoot the big purple blob and pray to God that it explodes. And Gotham Knights was kind of the same thing. You would fight, the grunt, the brute, and then like the tank enemy type, and that was really about it. These games, in terms of enemy variety and boss variety, didn't really have much going for them, especially too in Suicide Squad's case, just reusing 13 Brainiacs over and over. Although, like what I said, both of these games could have had better boss varieties, and you know, that's really about it to talk about that. Another thing I like to mention with both of these games that was lacking in both is side missions. Gotham Knights only had three, and that was really the best part of Gotham Knights were the side missions, which were Harley Quinn, Mr. Freeze, and Clayface. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world when I was fighting, a group of thugs in Gotham Knights, and they just all turned into clay. I was dying. Like, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. But then I was like, oh my god, it's Clayface. And but we're kind of used to the fact of from the Arkhamverse, usually 10 to 14 side missions. I think Arkham Knight had like 18 side missions, and Gotham Knights only had three, a huge step down. And in Suicide Squad, yes, they had support squad missions, which technically I guess you could say were side missions, but they were clearly lacking. It was clearly a step back from what we all knew and loved from the Arkhamverse. And plus two, I think people were just expecting a lot more since it was Rocksteady. While, with WB Montreal, they get a little more of a pass for not really delivering in terms of the side missions department. But, lastly, to conclude, obviously, I, in my opinion, think Suicide Squad is a lot better. Where I rate Gotham Knights, I would have to say it is honestly a 4 or 5 out of 10, while Kill the Justice League for me is, I would say, a 7 out of 10. I'm not saying that these games are 10 out of 10s, and you should take my opinion and follow them. If you like Gotham Knights more, that's totally cool. If you like Suicide Squad more, that's totally cool as well. It's just, to me, I feel like this is kind of just a crazy time in terms of DC gaming, is that these are really the only two games we have had on, the big scale in the last few years. Now, obviously, we all know that Rocksteady is working on a Batman game. So, we could probably revisit this in a few years and talk about, which games will ultimately, like, which games, are better. And it'll probably be the Batman game since, but in all honesty, let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think is better? I feel, like what I said, Suicide Squad is the better game. It's the more polished game. I think it just runs better, it feels better, it looks better. It's more, grand than Gotham Knights, but I think Gotham Knights still offers a lot of great things. Both of these games offer a lot of great things. It's just, they're not really, when you put them face to face, they're not really the, the best things ever. They're kind of just average games, which I think, from our standpoint, from us DC fans, we're not really used to average games. We're used to perfection from what Rocksteady used to bring us. But anyways, though, enough rambling from me. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. This is Pineapple Sway. I will see you guys next time.